Welcome again, everybody, to another episode of Escape Velocity. Today, I'm joined by someone who is not just a strategist, but also a author, a poet, a partner, and someone I've had the privilege of collaborating with on some of the most meaningful projects of my career, Pete Mackey. He's the founder of Mackey Strategies, where he helps organizations find their voice, sharpen their story, and face the future with clarity and confidence, which is no easy task these days. Pete's had more than 30 years leading communications for top institutions like Amherst, Bucknell, and the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, and he brings deep expertise in higher education and a unique lens as a creative as well as a strategist. So, Pete, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. Obviously, great to be with you. You know how much I admire you, so delighted to be here.
Well, thanks for giving me your time. We have worked together for over the course of many years, and I think what brought us together initially, back in for that first Bucknell project many years ago, was you were looking for a team, I think, that was not going to just deliver some reheated status quo work, and you felt like the institution really could use some differentiation and some positioning, and we loved that was your challenge to us, and I think that's always been why we've come together over the years. One of the things I'm curious about, I don't think a lot of people know that you're also a poet, and you're more, I think, more visible on the author side for your books. But as a writer and as someone who works in a creative space with writing, how do you, let's just jump right into it. How do you feel that your creative work informs your client work and your teamwork?
Yeah. Thank you, Tracy. So I think they all come down to the same thing. First of all, I'll just say I have always loved working with words. When I was a little boy, I was the kid in our household working on some paper that I needed to turn in seventh grade, working through the night over and over, writing it by hand, loose leaf sheet after loose leaf sheet, and then typing it and having to use whiteout to fix my mistakes. And my parents would come check on me at 2 and 3 in the morning. I would be at the dining room table still working at that, trying to get that paragraph or that paper right. I've always loved doing that. And the reality is the work I do, I think if it's not creative, then you're frankly not doing your job. I think part of the responsibility that we have to the institutions that choose to work with us is to help think differently for them in service to them, and to peel back the layers of the normal rhetoric and normal expression in whatever medium that they might be using to help them stand out. We all know part of the message is the medium, so you have to have a creative integration of the way you say it, you use to express it. And I think that's kind of what is always fascinating me both about the work I do and then the side creative projects I undertake.
Well, that's I think it's a timely conversation as we see what's sort of being targeted when it comes to the creative fields. I think people, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, they understand that creatives will bring some level of disruption, because they are going to tell the truth. They are going to show you or convey to you what they see without a lot of layers of, BS.
Right.
And that can be impactful.
Yeah.
And which scares a lot of people if it's not aligned, right?
Yeah.
So when you're working in particular with institutions that have, legacy, and they've got audiences and boards and trustees and all of that, how do you navigate that sort of natural fear around forward momentum, change, innovation, truth telling?
Yeah. Well, in one way, my team and I work with some of the most well-established sort of legacied, if you'll pardon the term, institutions in American higher ed: Amherst College, Williams College, Trinity College, Trinity University. These are extraordinary institutions with deep histories of achievement and leadership. And you might think that the natural inclination of such places is to just do what they've been doing. And yet, I would just say, if you look at the way they teach and evolve their pedagogy, the way their faculty produced groundbreaking scholarship and research, the truth is their intellectual life is quite daring. And so part of our job when we work with these schools is, frankly, to probe their willingness to take creative risks. My experience has been, by and large, institutions of higher education, whether they're nonprofit foundations, colleges, universities, they are willing to take risks if they feel it's worth it. And part of our job is to show them that this creative expression of who they are can break through in a way maybe that they haven't before, while carrying that deep history and legacy that deserves extraordinary respect, but expressing it in, let's just say, a 21st century way that sets itself apart and brings it renewed attention.
In the world that we live in today, with there not just being a primary means of communication. I mean, 30 years ago, there was a view book
Yeah, right,
and some pieces of mail and maybe a visit.
right,
Um, or there was an annual report, a board meeting, things like that. Today, when you have so many different places where people are engaging with not just the words, but the feelings and the sentiment and all of that, and where there is so much of a shift towards what we call user generated content, right? Sort of straight from the horse's mouth.
right, right.
How do you balance that with what can be maybe defined as like an institutional need or desire to hold on to the messaging and control the messaging?
Well, I'm going to sort of share two operating philosophies I have. One is that, and the way I look at the work people like we do is not that we are trying to create a message, for example, and whatever expression that means, visual, print, language, whatever. It's not to create a story of this institution. It is to reflect one. To me, there is a foundational difference. And where do you reflect one? By listening. The way I look at it is, if you were to think about all the great colleges and universities in America and look at each of them from, call it 10,000, 20,000 feet up, in many ways they look the same. They educate highly motivated students. They try to provide all the educational support service they can for each student's success. They have high quality facilities to do so, great faculty to do so, and so on. And in that way, they're all the same. The closer you move to the people on the campus, from 5,000 feet to 1,000 feet to face, the more the ways they are different come out. So we take a lot of time early in our relationships to listen. We're really driven by listening. We want to hear what the students, the faculty, the staff, the alumni, the parents, the trustees, the donors, all those members of the community who know it so well say about it. Why does it matter to them? What separates itself for them about this institution in their hearts and minds? And ultimately, what we're trying to do is reflect that back to them, so that the people who know it best can say, yes, that's my school, that's my home, that's my alma mater. And that takes a lot of just paying attention very closely in these conversations. And that's really the basis under which we build all the work we do.
Yeah, you've worked internal
Yeah.
and now external.
Yeah.
And I've always been external facing, but having gone through my own, company's brand and marketing work, I just know how I always say the closer you get to the mirror
Yeah.
of where you are, who you are, what you represent, the harder it is to see it
Totally.
dynamically.
Totally.
You get kind of skewed in your thinking, or you hold on to stories that are no longer true, and you kind of
Totally.
have this legacy of experience that builds up, and the outside experience or vision
Yeah.
that is built on that listening seems like just a critical thing for, I mean, anybody
Yeah.
to be looking to. I think in our personal lives, we've got our therapists and our best friends and all of that, but
Right. Right. Yeah.
how do you feel about the work as you've shifted from many years internal to external? I mean, over the past, it's been 8, 9 years now.
Yeah, honestly, so I was inside, right? I was head of communications at the University of South Carolina for basically the entire 90s. Then I became the head of communications for a new foundation in Ireland, Science Foundation Ireland. And then I became the head of communications for a new scholarship foundation, namely the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, just as it was really getting its legs. And then I was the first head of communications at Bucknell University that they had, served there 8 years. And then I was the first chief communications officer overseeing the entire communications and marketing portfolio for Amherst College. And I bring up that background because it's the way my career evolved. I just happened to be the first one at these places. It's just the industry was evolving. The role of this vice president or CCO was really coming broadly across the spectrum of higher institutions. Um, and I loved the building process. I loved kind of thinking through these foundational questions. For the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation and Science Foundation Ireland, they really had no brand. They had no communications and marketing in a comprehensive way. So I had to think through a whole bunch of origin questions. And then obviously Bucknell had an extraordinary reputation. They had 5 different teams working on communications and marketing, but they're all reporting to different offices. So it was a very interesting challenge to try to bring these. It was 40 people, including 20 in the print and mail shop, and then the other 20 or so were in the creative portfolios. To bring that whole team together was a really interesting question, and they're incredibly talented. So I've always enjoyed the challenge of answering who are we and how do I motivate these really dedicated, talented staff around me to make the best of their passions and talents. I'll just add, since becoming a consultant, through no intentionality, I've been an interim head of communications at 6 other institutions across the last years or so. And frankly, when I started this firm, I didn't have the plan to do that. Turns out I have a lot of experience that I hope has been useful to those places. But honestly, one of the most fulfilling parts of those jobs, I would say it's 2 things. One is, most of all, bringing the team together and hopefully re-energizing their talents and redirecting them in ways that they feel they're able to contribute most effectively as incredibly creative, dedicated staff members to that institution. And the second is trying to find that clarity of helping them tell that story in a way that is different and honest to the institution in a way that cuts through maybe it hadn't before. So I love being a consultant. This fall, I think we will be starting year 9. I love doing it. Um, I love working with different institutions and facing those kinds of challenges.
All right, I've got some rapid fire questions for you. If you're up for that.
Okay. It's like Jeopardy.
Yeah. What do you think is the one thing, if there can be one thing, that the internal teams overthink?
Wow. Um, I would, I'm not sure I have the right answer to that. Here's what I would say. What I've encountered most when I've assumed the responsibility of being an interim, and those roles have been 6 months, they've been a year and a half, they've been a year, in one case, over 2 years. So interim has different meanings depending on the institution's needs.
Yeah.
I would say it's less overthinking than having become restrained or reluctant to advance their ideas because of some rough experiences in offering creative ideas previously. And you get smacked down a few times in trying to take risks and trying to be creative. It's very natural to say I'll play it safer next time. And I've kind of felt part of my job in those roles is to get to know those staff, and to usually I discover that, and in most cases that's been the realization. So how do I clear the way for them to return to that creative space?
How important is it that this work is shepherded and supported from the top?
It's critical. I've always believed that in so many words, you cannot succeed as a head of communications, whether you're a CCO or VP, whatever the title might be, as the top person that answers to the president for that portfolio. Your odds of succeeding, let's put it this way, are exceedingly low if you don't have a deep, trusting relationship with the president. The president has to trust you, and you have to trust the president, because in the role of serving institutional communications and marketing, you're right. You're in many ways, you're prioritizing the whole identity of this institution. So you and the president had better have a deep understanding of one another and an ability to work out those hard questions about identity, language, message, right? Especially in the exceedingly fast way that the modern media force communications at institutional levels to move. You have to have that foundation so you can move quickly when you need to. And so that partnership, knowing the president trusts you and vice versa, is seminal to doing the job.
Yeah, I think that's a such an important thing to get some sense of. I think whenever I'm engaging with a new client, is how far up the ladder does this go, and do you have the full support of
Totally.
leadership
Totally.
to do what needs to be done? And let's face it, today uh, things are moving fast.
Right.
There's not a lot of tolerance for um, long, drawn out,
Right.
expensive work, but there's also a lot at stake.
That's right. That's right. The stakes are huge, and being a college or university president is an exceedingly difficult job these days. They have a million things coming at them. Everybody in the communities of every kind, second guessing decision making, and so you've got to help that president succeed. And the truth is, it's at least as important to believe in the president. Like, you pour so much of yourself into the work, you better believe in them as a leader.
Yeah. What is what's one of the most courageous things you've seen a leadership team do or move forward with?
Yeah, there's a number of them. I'll try and maybe tell three very quick stories, and I'll go from oldest to newest. Back in the '90s, I know this is a long time ago. I was working for an extraordinary president, John Palms, whom I am still close with and still admire. He was president for about 12 years, and I was his head of communications the entire time. And I'll put it this way: he had to confront some apparent racism in one of the campus communities that had resulted in a local commission rejecting his choice of chancellor for that campus. He had to go to that campus, speak to what the commission had done, to a full auditorium of people who were shocked that a black leader the president had chosen to be chancellor had subsequently been voted down by the local commission. Even though the local commission had no authority to do so, it so damaged that connection that that individual understandably chose then to reject a position he had accepted. And Dr. Palms waded into that head on in public and say why, and basically said why that was wrong and he would not permit it again. And I remember standing backstage with him before he walked out into that auditorium, and I remember seeing how calm he was. And I basically said, I was a young man then, I was probably 27, something like that. And I said to him, basically, there's a full auditorium. Every news outlet in the state is covering this matter. How are you so calm? And he said, because I'm doing the right thing.
Mhm.
He was, by challenging that commission's decision, by saying henceforth they would have no role in this process, and other reasons that he was explaining his predicament and his dismay about what they had done. He was doing the right thing. The second one, I would basically say Bill Harris's leadership of Science Foundation Ireland. I was the head of communications when Bill started SFI at the government's request. The Irish government put €1 billion into this enterprise, staggering sum of money for a tiny country who had never made anything like that kind of investment before. And Bill was tasked with building out this whole enterprise from scratch. That takes courage, that takes leadership, that takes vision, that takes listening, that takes understanding the culture. And I was very proud to be supporting Bill in doing so because I believed in the work that the foundation was trying to do. And then the third one, I guess I would say, it's going to be in a smaller scale, Tracy, but you'll know those are kind of very big global matters I'm talking about with so many ethical dimensions to them. The one I'm about to say is far more specific. But you and I know we worked together at Bucknell, And I basically said something ridiculous to the community and to the faculty. And I was really just trying to chart a path of daring. I said, we're going to build the most innovative website in American higher education, which on its face is an absurd thing, of course. But I was just trying to push boundaries because I knew this culture prized innovation. It prized entrepreneurial attitude. And I felt this medium needed to reflect their identity. It's one of the reasons I brought you in, because you competed for that job. You wowed us that you were embracing innovation and entrepreneurship. And where I want to go is that president, John Brovman, who is still there, and I still consider a close friend, um, supported us
Yeah.
in a radical rethinking of how a college or university website should be constructed. As you know, we reverse engineered the whole process from the RFP process to the concluding result. And lo and behold, it gets named most innovative website in higher education, which I didn't even know what that was. Like there was such a thing. I think it was a Webby Award, right, that it gave that. But that wasn't the important thing. The important thing was the medium needed to reflect the identity of the institution, and the president had the confidence and courage to say, "Go ahead, you guys, give it a shot."
Yeah. Yeah. That was a fun one. Uh, everyone talks about how higher ed's, they continue to all look the same, all sound the same.
Yeah,
Um, I'm amazed at the amount of, drone campus photography and the taglines that,
yeah,
and it makes me think, is there a need to fit in? I mean, you wouldn't think that you need people to understand. Well, we need them to understand we're a liberal arts college, um, but they seem to be kind of needing to fit into this
yeah,
place that doesn't seem like, the risks of not being understood for what you are
yeah.
don't seem that high. So I'm just wondering
Yeah.
what you think is driving that, and how you think at least you're seeing some of, your clients work against that, because I mean, I don't think there's anything good in any of that.
Well, I'm honestly, I'm pretty sympathetic about the predicament that campuses or staffs in this space face. Right, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And when you have a million things coming at you, it is very natural, very understandable to manage these extraordinary expectations, to just do what you're familiar with, put it that way. Number one. Number two, it is hard to take risks. And it goes both ways. When you're an exceedingly strong institution, which frankly, most of the ones we work with are in that space, why change? Why dare anything? You've succeeded doing what you're doing. So there's a real argument to let the inertia play and roll it out. On the flip side, if you're an institution in a serious predicament, and we've supported institutions like that, it's terrifying to try something daring in how you are connecting with your communities. And so it's very natural. And I would, I wrote a book about James Joyce's Ulysses and chaos physics, right? So
Yes.
kind of physics is sort of a side fascination of mine, purely as the most layperson of laypersons. I will just say it this way. I believe in agitation. I believe in the small perturbation. And that's why I think part of our approach is very much asking provocative questions to see if there's some agitation or perturbation we can introduce into the thinking that is both within that institution and its culture's comfort zone, but to the furthest edges of its comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I have a lot of empathy for, places that are facing challenges, as well as the ones that are like, We're good. Let's not rock the boat," because there is a lot of fear, for some of these institutions right now, just around survival.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, it can be very hard to say, "We're scared. Let's now make scary decisions." So to stack fear, is not it goes against, I think, human instinct.
yeah,
Um, and I also can't imagine. I mean, the amount of audiences that these communications teams need to be talking to, in the amount of places they need to be trying to talk to them and reach them, the level of authenticity or polish or brand that's expected at every different touch point is different
Yeah.
for all these audiences. Do you think that there is a case to be made that you've got to start thinking about the way we approach the work differently,
Yeah.
because it has become so flat and so wide?
Yeah. I'm going to give you two quick answers. Yes. And I think the temptation is to start by thinking out here where the friction points are at the boundary between the institution and its audiences. And that will result in a lot of caution. And it, because, you talked about the many constituencies, teams in communications and marketing have to serve in service to their institution. All those constituencies now have numerous ways of expressing their dissatisfactions, right? This line of work was completely revolutionized by the advent of the iPhone and the smartphone and all the subsequent social media that it spawned, and so they don't exist anymore. They exist at a very permeable barrier. It goes both ways in an ebb and flow, and if that's your focus, you will naturally move with extreme caution. So part of the challenge of the work is to actually pull it closer to the heart of who this institution is, what it's trying to accomplish, how it can express that, and work outward. And I think that's one of the ways, at least, we try to think about the problems we're asked to help institutions solve.
Yeah. I've always said, it used to be that, when websites became a thing, right? They were a place where the brand and the messaging could get the most amplification,
Right.
right? And then social media became
Right.
real. And I was just reading some research that Gen Zs, they trust YouTube content more than
Yeah.
anything on Google or an institutional website. They trust what they see and hear on YouTube. And so the entire sort of landscape of where impact is made or where relationships are created has changed so radically. Um, and I agree with you. You've got to, I love when we were working together and you were talking about sort of the essence of how Mackey Strategies works. It's to getting to the core
Yeah. Yeah.
with that listening and those questions. And I agree with you. That is where it has to start so that it will have some foundation as it gets amplified in all of these different places. Otherwise, it's just tactics that you're kind of pecking at,
Right. Right.
that don't have a lot of substance to keep them going, frankly.
Yeah. And the more honest, authentic, effective, and at the same time creative it is, the more likely you are to stick with it
Yeah.
when times get rough. And times will get rough. There will be people who think you're an idiot, people who think you have no idea what you're doing, and they're not going to be shy about telling you. And maybe you are, honestly. You really have to ask yourself when that happens, like, what did I miss? Maybe they're right. And what can I learn from that? If you reflect on that and you still think, no, we're doing this for very particular reasons, then you stick with it. But you're much more likely to reach the second conclusion if you've done the homework to really find something that you want to express that is really right for that school and really true to that school and its culture.
When you are going through sort of the listening, question asking process with
Yeah.
clients, we'll specifically talk about higher eds.
Yeah.
Um, oftentimes students have this attitude of, hey, I'm paying a lot of money here. The school should be working for me. I got this gripe. I got that gripe. They have a unique perspective of it, but I think they also should be saying things that really are at the heart of what that's why I think talking to the students is so important
Yeah.
on these campuses, because they should be living the experience that the brand is promising, right? And the communications are promising. What other audiences do you think hold keys to that? And maybe it's all of them, but and
Keys
in terms of
to.
in terms of priority of these audiences, who do you think
Oh,
where do you think some of the most interesting insights come from?
it's to me, it obviously changes based on the institution. So I'll generalize. It is oftentimes our conversations with students are most illuminating.
Hmm.
Maybe that's seems obvious because they're the young people that we are all dedicated to educating. Maybe that seems obvious, but they're also young people, right? And so you might also, if you're not familiar enough with this work, might think, what do they have to say about expressing this institution's identity to every constituency it works within the world? So when we do our discovery process, we have really intensive conversations with people, and they always include students, they always include faculty, and then you can name all the other constituencies.
Yeah.
Obviously, the other one, honestly, I've actually had the experience that I would say there's a lot of skepticism that actually faculty can help us in this work. I've never found that to be true. I have very much learned from faculty almost every engagement we've had when we're trying to figure out that brand identity, what the faculty think of this place, what they think separates it from others. And I do like to be honest with the faculty when the situation, calls for certain types of work, to just explain to faculty, you are a scholar and a teacher in this particular discipline that you have mastered. Very few people that we're going to be communicating with on behalf of you and this college or university are. So we have to use a different vocabulary, right? And so I learned long ago that language is the currency of faculty. And there's a whole story I could tell about that I'll leave out. But suffice it to say, it's understandable that faculty are highly concerned about the language you are using to describe the brand, the message, the lead identity of this place to which they typically dedicate the better part or all of their careers. They care profoundly. This is their home, their place of work. They know these places intimately. And so we've also learned a great deal from those conversations. And we try to open, like when we have these conversations, we ask very open-ended questions. We want to open doors to hearing them. We don't want to go with any pre-prescribed notion. That's why I say we're not trying to create a message. We're trying to reflect one.
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest challenge of the next
Mm,
2 years facing higher eds?
well, I think like anyone who cares about teaching, scholarship, research, academic freedom, freedom of speech, the power and value that higher education institutions have to strengthen America, educate its young people, contribute in so many ways to the well being of our society. I am deeply, deeply concerned about what is happening with the current White House administration,
Mhm.
and the discussions underway in Congress, the actions that have been taken, I think, to harm almost everything I named. Um, I think we have. First of all, I think higher ed has to do a much better job of telling its story in ways that are understandable and accessible. Secondly, I think we have to stand together, shoulder to shoulder, as institutions, to resist these many actions that are being taken that I think are really deleterious to our American culture, our American economy, our American opportunities. And I think it's not going to work if we all, each individual institution, resist it that way. We have to work together. We have to help each other. We have to help make the case, and we have to work in the halls of Congress to advocate both against some decisions that have yet to be made and to fight the ones that we can in the courts and elsewhere that we know are not good for America.
I agree with you 100% on that point. I do want to wrap up because I know you've got some big calls coming up. I guess the last thing I would like to ask is what you think about how Harvard has stood up, or at least presented a different kind of, and I know there's financial
Yeah.
implications that are different for all of these institutions.
Well, I think what the response you saw to Harvard, was the rallying around its decision to oppose the current administration's decisions, was people across our society saying enough is enough and that we need someone to step into the vanguard and say that. I am hopeful that that reaction is a signal of a more unified front of advocacy, both in the positive way on behalf of why higher education and the work it does in service to our world and our nation will be more effective and clearer and stronger. I also think I agree and think I agree with those who say that by stepping into the vanguard, Harvard, with all the financial might it possesses, provides a very potent force to rally behind.
Yeah.
So both awakening something positive to fight for the case that higher ed has to make, which is powerful about how we strengthen our country, as well as to make the case against some of these highly concerning decisions and actions.
Yeah. Well, Pete, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today about, I know we could go on for hours, so I'll
Thank you,
let you
Tracy.
go. Always a
Thanks for having
pleasure.
me. Likewise.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye bye.